Hey, it's Ashley here to walk you through the different childhood experiences of the Enneagram types. I got this information from You've Got a Type, and I had a chance to poll it with the Facebook groups. Everyone has a different childhood, and you might find your best fit childhood within this type, within this model, but this is really simplified. Also, it's important to note that parents do the best they can, and a lot of these experiences may just be more perceptions of the child, so that's something to consider. I've ordered these types from most commonly occurring in the population to least common in the population. So we start with the Peacemaker, type 9. Type 9s experience some form of childhood trauma. This can look like divorce, death, or even sexual abuse. And in response, the child unknowingly dissociates from their emotions. The type 9 child will recall a pleasant childhood, but supposedly that's because they've developed an ability to not really fully experience the present, the painful emotions that they are experiencing. They're able to dissociate from that. The type 9 child learned to be low maintenance and without needs because they learned that by expressing their emotions, especially anger, that results in more trouble than it's worth. About a third of the population is a type 9, and they create harmony between people. They're successful mediators because they're able to detach and see things from everyone's perspective. Next, we have the type 6, the Loyalist. I see this as typically a household with higher conflict in the home. Here we have a good cop and a bad cop parent. So we have more of the friend parent to the child, and we also have the disciplinarian parent. In response, the child will ally with one parent to protect themselves from the other parent. This type will seek security at all cost, forming the next common type in the population, type 6. Lastly, in our first tier of most common types, we have the type 3, and I have here the M for kind of mommy issues. This type 3 becomes the performer, the achiever, and our culture in America is a type 3 culture. The type 3 child was praised by their mom very much because in order to numb the shame of family chaos in the home, what was praised was public hyperactivity. So being success in the eyes of the culture, showing off to your peers was rewarded. And the child learned that they were loved for what they do rather than who they are. And that shaped their behavior to become a winner. Moving on to our second tier, the type 2, the giver, learned that love was earned just like the type 3, but instead of through achievement, it was earned by being a helpful child through personal sacrifice. And the two learned that you need to give love to get love. Unconsciously, an undeveloped type 2, when they're no longer the center of attention, they may manipulate and pull strings in relationships so that they can get back the center of attention. Moving on to type 7, here we have a mother who lacks the traditional softness, femininity. The child felt that the mom lacked sufficient empathy and attention, and this led to the child fending for themselves and entertaining themselves, becoming the enthusiast in adulthood. Enthusiasts love to travel, they love novelty. They also struggle with stimulant drugs when they're unhealthy. Type 1, the idealist, the moral perfectionist, who wants to be making sure that things are done just so. The type 1 was dissatisfied with their family structure because of typically the father figure. So in response to the chaos and dysfunction of the family, the type 1 child developed their own guidelines on how to parent themselves, and they have this judgment criteria for other people too. They have really high standards, and they tend to be critical and judgmental when they're less developed. Finally, the most rare types. If you are one of these last 3 types, I recall that 8 is about maybe 3% of the population, 5 is 1%, and 4 is less than 1%. This is according to Rian C., his estimations. The type 8 grew up in the most high conflict household. The 8 had to grow up fast because of the childhood trauma they experienced. A lot of the time, the father left the household and the 8 became fixated on being a survivor and making sure that they had sufficient resources to live. The 8 will devalue emotions, gentleness, things perceived as weaknesses, because they learn that showing that side of themselves to the world can lead them to be betrayed, rejected, abandoned, just like they had experienced in their childhood. And in adulthood, they become challengers who seek to rise to power, to control their environment. Moving on to type 5, the thinker, the detached, rational thinker. The 5 child perceived that the mom did not protect them from the chaos of the home. This may even be, I take that back. Yes, the mom perceived that the mom did not protect the children, and this led the 5 child to value their independence rather than being in relationship with other people. So because the family home was chaotic, they stayed in their room a lot of the time, and they might have escaped into their mind with books, games, computer games. So in being independent in this way and denying social relationships, they devalue their femininity. Even men have a feminine side, feminine energy, denying their emotions and social connections. Finally, type 4, the artist, the most rare type. These types felt like they were an outsider in their own home. They felt like their parents did not understand them. So in response, they crafted a world within themselves, and they identified themselves. They got their identity from this world that they crafted, their imagination. They also tried to look for a rescuer as a parent, a substitute parent who could perhaps understand them and affirm their imagination, the vision of what they have in their minds. So looking at all of this, I know for myself, some of these stories correspond with my experience. However, there is a dominant story. There is a story here that most strongly connects with my personal experience. So you'll probably find that for yourself as well. Also, this is, I think, an illustration of how you take a child and their nature, how they were born, and then you see the parents' influence on that child and how that plays out. So for example, a 4 having this whimsical imagination, it's really similar to a 5 in the sense that they withdraw from the family, but it's their unique nature that led them to become an artist as opposed to a thinker. The 5 had turned to books and rationality as opposed to more of the artsy imagination of the 4. So it's just really interesting that a child's nature can the child's nature stays the same, but with the different cues in the environment, perhaps a child, unless their nature were really strong, could become one type or another type. I think this is so fascinating. I think a final point, though, is for you Enneagram enthusiasts out there, let's say, for example, you're a 3. You know that your story most strongly corresponds with either a 2 or a 4, because the 3 is adjacent to the 2 and the 4. Also, the 3 has lines to 6 and 9. It's just really interesting. I hope that you found this helpful. Again, this is just a model. I don't mean to box you into any specific narrative, but I hope that you found this useful as a tool for understanding how your childhood shaped your adulthood.